Fly Fishers, Lance Egan here with Fly Fish Food. Today I'm going to show you a new version of my Corn-Fed Sally. So if you're seeing some yellow sallies on your water, this is a go-to fly of mine. It's version 2.0. We had an original. This is the updated version. Let's get to tying.
That's a big brown roll.
Hey friends, Lance Egan here with Fly Fish Food. Today I'm going to show you one of my favorite summertime dry flies, the Corn-Fed Sally. So this is a yellow Sally imitation, and this is kind of version 2.0 of that fly. There's a little backstory to that. Originally, when I was tasked with coming up with a CDC style yellow Sally pattern from my friends at Umpqua, the then fly manager, I suppose you could call him, the new fly manager, was Bruce Olson. Bruce had been in the business a long time. He knew the business very, very well, and if you knew Bruce at all, you also knew that he was fairly opinionated. And I sent in a Corn-Fed Sally to my liking, to my color scheme and so on, and he liked everything about it except for the wing color. He thought the wing color should be pale yellow, and I had sent it with more of a kind of a dun colored wing with CDC. So most of the Sallies I see, not all of them, but most of them I see, I would argue, have kind of a dun colored wing or maybe tannish gray colored wing. Occasionally I've seen some that have more of a yellow colored wing. So I know there's some variation out there depending on where you are geographically and maybe just river to river. That said, I sent in the samples with a dun colored wing as I thought they should be done, and Bruce said, "That's really cool, I really like the fly, but it needs to be more yellow. So make the wing yellow, and then we can make this fly work." So I sent him some more samples with the yellow wing, and that was the Corn-Fed Caddis, or the Corn-Fed Sally. So he accepted that pattern. We put it in the catalog. We've sold them for probably, I'm not exactly sure, maybe in the neighborhood of 8 or 10 years. And then a couple years ago, the current fly manager, Brent Bauer over at Umpqua, good friend of mine, sent me a message saying, "Hey, I think we want to look at maybe revamping or maybe doing a new Sally pattern. The Corn-Fed is not selling as well as we would like. Do you have any thoughts about changing it or things that we could add to it or something like that?" And I said, "Yeah, we can add a different color wing. I think the wing color is wrong on it." And he said, "Oh, that's interesting. That's exactly what I was thinking. It needs more of a dun colored wing instead of yellow." And so I told him the backstory there, and we had a good laugh. Probably at Bruce Olson, bless his heart, rest in peace, a little bit at his expense, but I believe Bruce was trying to do the best to his ability to make a fly that would sell, and we are now doing the same. So this is the updated version. So if you've bought Corn-Fed Sallies in the past, you'll know that they had a yellow CDC wing, and the current version, if you buy them, has this dun colored wing. So I wanted to kind of show you what that is and what that looks like and give you the updated version. So let's start tying this fly. So I've started with a hook and the vise. This is a Tiemco 100 in a size 14. You could tie these in 16s, you could tie these in 12s. 14 is probably the one I fish the very, very most, maybe followed by 16. Occasionally I see them as big as 12s. Next I'm going to use this yellow nano silk. This is 50 denier from Semperfly. Any thin yellow thread could work for this, but this particular thread I like a lot for this pattern because I need to cinch down quite tight on the CDC wing, and this is very strong thread and also does not build up much bulk, so it's my go-to for any of these Corn-Fed style flies. I'm just going to start the thread on the hook. It does take a few extra wraps with the nano silk. It's a pretty slippery thread, so you got to do a few more wraps to anchor that thread to the hook itself. And then it helps also when cutting nano silk to have some very sharp scissors or something with a serrated edge like these Renomed scissors. So this is the Fly Tire Big Loops Straight, kind of my go-to scissor at the moment. And I got rid of the excess thread to start that in, and now we're going to tie in a little hotspot, a little trigger point here in the back end. So this is just EP trigger point. This is the UV orange color. It's very, very bright color. And if you've ever watched any yellow Sallies, ever seen them on the river, you know that most of them have a little egg sac attached to the back end of them that's very orange. That's what this is imitating. So I'm just going to take some of this trigger point, capture it a time or two with the thread, Then I'm going to wrap over it. That way it's elbowed in and locked in, can't slip out. Using quite a bit of thread tension to hold that and lock that in place. Move the thread forward, then I'm just going to cut this to length. I don't need this to be very long. It's just a very short hot spot, much like you'd put on a little Euro nymph. All right, next up we're going to add the ribbing material. These often have a little hint of orange through them. I'm just going to use this fluorescent orange 140 thread. You could use, it doesn't have to be UTC, it could be Danville, it could be a fluorescent orange in a Semperfly or a Vivus, just a little bit thicker thread to use as the ribbing material. So I'm going to wrap it on the hook, wrap it all the way back towards the little hotspot egg sac tag there. And now we've got our ribbing material tied in. Next up, we're going to add the body. The body for this is pale yellow superfine. It doesn't really matter which brand of superfine dubbing you get, but this is pale yellow color. Any yellow color you use could work, but this pale yellow for me best imitates the little yellow sallies that I often see on my local waters. As always, when you're dubbing, less is more. I'm just going to use tiny little pinches. You can barely even see that on the camera there. You don't need very much of it. We're going to make a little bit of a narrow dubbing noodle to work up the shank. I don't really need a lot of it. This is how much I had extra, so I didn't use very much of it. I made a very thin dubbing noodle, you can kind of see there. And I'm just going to wrap this up the body. So we're going to start right at the hot spot, try and make sure we're covering everywhere. I missed a little spot there. I'm going to go back and try and cover that very first wrap a little tighter. There we go. So I cover that little orange spot where I tied it in. I sometimes wrap forward, then wrap back to create a little bit of taper to it. I need to add just a touch more to make it back up to the front, where I'm going to add the wing after I rib this fly. So now we're going to create a bit of a taper. That's about as far forward as I want to go, so I'm going to use up the rest of that dubbing like so, and make kind of a nice little tapered body. Next we're going to rib this fly, so I'm going to just throw a little half hitch in or a little quick whip finish with the midge whip finisher. Use my bobbin cradle, and I want to counter wrap this. I wrapped the dubbing one direction, I want to wrap this thread the other direction, and I often like to twist this thread quite a bit to cord it up also so it doesn't spread out too wide. I want the base color to be yellow. I just want it to have a hint of orange going through the body. That's it. Not very much. Don't overpower it with orange. Just a little bit of orange. We want the main color to stay that pale, pale yellow. Capture that with a thread. Get rid of the excess. Now we have our rib in place. Okay, now this is the next couple steps are the trickiest part of this fly. It's really not that bad, but it is the trickiest part. What I'm going to do is use some just natural dun or light dun colored CDC. And what I've done is I've already trimmed some of these, so I take them and I grab the tips of them like this, and I find about where the length of the wing is going to be with these fibers. So on this fly I'm going to trim away this very top cap of it. I'm left with this, then I'm going to go down and basically trim that same distance down again like this. Ending up with that kind of V-shaped piece of CDC. I'm going to go down and do the same thing again. This is in an effort to tie in lots of CDC but not get as much stem. So what I'm going to do is place these on top of each other, like I'm stacking the stems on top of each other. That's 2 fibers so far. Let's find another one. Here's a third one. And you get to decide how much bulk you put on this fly. The more CDC you add to it, the higher it will float, but the more bulky the fly becomes. It's maybe not quite as dainty. And I'm going to stack these until I have about as much CDC as I want for my wing. And one hack here is the bottom of these CDC feathers. If they're not too fuzzy, I often put one of those on the very top to make the top of the wing a little bit lighter. I find that that's easier to see with that light color on top and dark color on the bottom. Might as well add one more of these just to add a little extra CDC. Stick that one on the bottom because it's pretty dark. Now what I do is push my finger into the stems like this to get all the stems as lined up as possible. Stroke all those fibers over like this. Then I'm going to tie them in basically right where all the stems start or where they terminate, depending on how you want to look at that. So I'm trying not to tie in any of the stem. I'm trying to just tie in CDC. So I'm going to pinch those right here. This is where this really strong thread comes in place. I'm going to use a pinch wrap, and I'm going to try to keep from allowing that CDC to rotate too far across the hook. I want it to really stay right on top like that. There we've created a pretty nice CDC wing. I'm going to do some wraps in front of this, a couple more wraps behind. Then I'm going to come in with the scissors and trim away all this excess, being careful not to cut my thread so that I don't undo everything that I just did. Then I'm going to take this thread and kind of wrap through those butts a little bit to try and really secure them in there, make sure that thing doesn't go anywhere on the wing. And that's the CDC portion of the wing. Now you can leave that as buggy as you like. You can come in here and break some of these off if you want. You can cut them too if you'd like. You can go in with your scissors and just give them a trim. I don't think that it really matters much either way, but on my own I tend to leave them long, and I don't even usually trim them. On the commercially available style, you'll see that they're on the shorter side of things. They're either trimmed or broken, as they sell better when they look a little bit neater. That's the CDC portion of our wing. Then just to add a little more visibility, I'm going to take some white trigger point. So same EP trigger point we had before, but in white instead of the UV orange. And I'm going to take just a little bit of this from the side of this guy here. Take him from the top, cut it away. And again, I've cut away half as much as I want for my wing because I'm going to tie it in, elbow it in, so I'm going to end up with twice this much on the fly. So we do that by sticking this on top, capturing it with the thread. I missed. Let's do a better job of a pinch wrap here. There we go. Capture it with the thread, then fold it over. This way I'm not trimming any butts on the front of the fly, and I am locking it in, elbowing it in again so it can't pull loose. And I'm just going to trim these to the length that I like. That's just adding visibility, making it easier for that fly for you to see that fly, the white on top. Sometimes I even add a little orange or green or a little strip of glow bright, something like that on the very top of my own to make them even easier to see in low light conditions. But the white is how they are done commercially. So there we have that. Next up, we're going to do the trickiest part of this so far. For this, we need a dubbing spinner, a little dubbing loop spinner. This particular one is a Stonefly version with a ball bearing and with spring steel here that closes very easily. So what I'm going to do is run my thread through the two little hooks like so. Let's see if I can get it to where you can see it. If I spin it a little bit, you can kind of see the thread going through the two hooks. Then I'm going to come back up to the hook itself. I'm going to wrap around a couple times. I'm going to wrap around the base of it to close the loop off. I'm just going to let that hang in my tool. Now I've created the thread loop. We're going to put CDC in there and make a little CDC hackle. But before I do, I find that this CDC hackle stays in place and doesn't move around on that little tapered front end, the tapered thorax portion of my fly very well if I don't add this. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit more of the superfine dubbing. It doesn't take much. I'm just going to kind of level out where I tied in that wing and create just a base layer. The dubbing's soft enough that the thread can kind of bite into it. So when I go to wrap this CDC hackle through this, it has a little more stable platform to be wrapped in on. So I'm just going to kind of cover. It doesn't have to be pretty because it's going to get covered with the CDC, just giving it a base, right? Okay, next up, we're going to take a CDC hackle. Sorry, we're going to make a CDC hackle. I'm going to take a couple of CDC feathers. These are fairly large CDC feathers. This is the Swiss CDC. You can do these in blue dun, light dun, medium dun, any of those. I've just grabbed two of the feathers. There's two of them there. And I'm going to line the two stems up. I'm going to grab the tips and stroke the fibers down a little bit. I lost one. Let's grab that one back. Grab the tips like so, stroke the fibers down so that they're sticking out a bit more like that. We're going to come in with the fancy CDC clip, the Swiss clamp, and just one side of this I'm going to clamp with the little clip here, not too tight to the stems, and just hold it in place like that. Then what I'm going to do is come in here and trim the stems away, leaving some of the fiber out so that I can capture it with the thread loop. It looks like that. Then I can use these CDC feathers for my next fly. I can use the other side, so we're not going to waste those. Next, I'm going to take the CDC that's in the clamp here, and I'm going to put it inside my thread loop. So I've got my stonefly tool that opens up. You can see it's closed there and now open. I'm going to untwist it so that it will open all the way to the hook like that. And then once it stays open, I can slide this Swiss clamp in here and then slowly pull down to where I've just got the thread around the CDC, pinch and squeeze the clamp to remove the fibers, and then I've got all of those CDC fibers in the little thread loop. Next up, I take this dubbing tool and just use the ball bearing and spin it up into a rope. It's trapping some of those fibers closest to the hook. I'm going to try and pluck some of those out with my scissors, but that's okay even if it does. We're just going to twist this up like crazy to make it look something like this. It looks really buggy, looks really awful, but when we get it on this fly, it's going to look magic, and the fish love it. I'm going to stroke some of those fibers to the side, and I'm just going to start wrapping this hackle. This makes this fly very, very buggy. It captures a lot of little air bubbles, helps it float. These imitate legs. For whatever reason, when you use the CDC hackle, it makes for a very buggy fly that fish really like. So you can see I'm just kind of budding wraps moving up the shank here till I run out of room. That's going to be my last wrap, just kind of stroking the fibers back with each wrap. All right, so I'm just going to capture that CDC loop of thread with my tying thread a couple of times in place there to hold the tension. And I'm going to pull down and really tighten this up. Next, I can get rid of the excess here. Cut that away, get rid of my dubbing loop tool. I'm going to pull out enough thread here now to whip finish. Grab the trusty Tiemco midge whip finisher and just create a little whip finish right behind the eye. Cleaning that guy up a little bit, pull nice and tight, trim the excess, and we have a corn-fed yellow Sally. Now, one of the things, this is optional too, but one of the things I like to do on my own is go into the bottom of this fly and just trim the CDC on the bottom. It lays a little more flush. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to cut it totally flush, but just get rid of some of the excess there. I think it lets more of the yellow show through, creates a little bit more of like outriggers to make the fly float better. So I've just trimmed it. You can see it's almost flat on the bottom. I've trimmed it away. Otherwise, that is our Corn-Fed Sally kind of version 2.0. We've got the hotspot on the wing. We have the orange tag for the egg sac and the tail. We've got our pale yellow body and the dun colored wing. That's a great fly when there's yellow Sallies around. Go get it wet.